As the evening light fades from your window and the world above settles into its quiet hush, imagine a soft, ethereal glow emerging not from the stars, but from beneath the waves, a warm, pulsating luminescence that filters through turquoise depths like the first blush of dawn on a forgotten shore. This is the gentle call of the coral reefs, those timeless underwater gardens where life unfolds in colors deeper than any dream you might chase tonight. In their swaying branches and hidden crevices, you'll discover a profound ease, a way for the mind to unwind like seaweed in a lazy current, releasing the subtle knots of the day and inviting a sleep as restorative as the tide's eternal return. Here, amidst the whisper of fin against frond and the faint chime of shells in the swell, nature offers its most reassuring gift, a pathway to wonder that cradles you, body and soul, into repose. If these submerged symphonies speak to your seeking heart, perhaps linger a moment to subscribe, joining a quiet community of night wanderers who return to such sanctuaries night after night. And now, as we begin this drift together, allow your breath to become the ocean's own. Inhale deeply, drawing in the imagined salt-kissed air, feeling your chest rise like a wave cresting under moonlight. Hold it softly, just for the span of a heartbeat's echo, then exhale, long and unhurried, letting the tension dissolve as the water recedes, carrying away what no longer serves. Breathe in, hold, and release. Feel yourself anchored now, weightless yet held, ready to descend into the living tapestry below. Coral reefs, those magnificent architects of the sea, emerge as the ocean's most vivid tapestries, woven not by hands but by the patient alchemy of countless tiny lives, each contributing to a structure that pulses with the very rhythm of existence itself. Picture them sprawling across sun-drenched shallows, their forms branching outward like the gnarled roots of ancient trees reaching for light, yet submerged in a realm where light bends and refracts into rainbows of impossible hue. These are no mere rocks or relics of some primordial forge, they are living cities, bustling metropolises beneath the surface, built by delicate creatures called coral polyps, small, soft-bodied beings, akin to the jelly-like centers of sea anemones you might recall from a childhood tide pool, that extend feathery tentacles to capture the sea's bounty and, in a quiet miracle of creation, secrete limestone skeletons to shield and expand their domain. Over eons, these skeletons accumulate, forming vast, intricate frameworks that rise from the seafloor like submerged cathedrals, inviting the dance of currents and the congregation of souls both seen and unseen. In their embrace, the reefs become cradles of complexity, hotspots of harmony where the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary, reminding us that even in the deepest solitude of the night, connection thrives in the spaces we least expect. What draws the eye and the spirit first to these underwater realms is their sheer, breathtaking scale, a grandeur that humbles even as it uplifts, much like gazing upon a mountain range at twilight and sensing the earth's unspoken stories etched into every peak. Spanning the globe from the sultry tropics of Indonesia's labyrinthine atolls to the crystalline edges of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, a colossal wonder stretching over 1,400 miles, visible even from the vastness of space, these ecosystems occupy a mere sliver of the ocean's expanse, less than 1% of its floor, yet they teem with a vitality that defies such modesty. Within this narrow band of warm, sunlit shallows, where waters hover between 77 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit, the reefs flourish, their calcium-rich foundations drawing from the sea's dissolved minerals like artists pulling pigments from an endless palette. They fringe coastlines in more than 100 countries and territories, from the vibrant bays of the Caribbean to the remote outposts of the Pacific, each one a unique expression of the ocean's generosity, shaped by the kiss of trade winds and the caress of seasonal monsoons, much like the bustling markets in those same coastal villages, where spices and stories mingle under the sun, offering a taste of the world's shared abundance. And oh, the colors they hold, the electric blues of branching staghorn corals unfurling like flames frozen in time, the rusty oranges of brain corals ridged like the folds of a contemplative brow, the soft lavenders and indigos of soft corals swaying as if in perpetual meditation. These hues are not mere decoration, they are the reef's language, a visual poetry that speaks of adaptation and allure, drawing in the light from above and scattering it back in prisms that dance across the sandy beds below, creating a perpetual twilight glow that soothes the soul much as a flickering candle might ease the edges of a restless room. Yet beyond the splendor of sight lies the true heartbeat of the reef, its boundless biodiversity, a symphony of coexistence that unfolds with the grace of 1,000 whispered conversations, each note essential to the whole. Here, in these limestone labyrinths, resides a quarter of all marine life, over 25% of the ocean's creatures finding sanctuary, sustenance, and story within the reef's protective arms, from the iridescent dart of a damselfish weaving through Gorgonian fans to the ponderous glide of a green sea turtle grazing on algal tufts. Imagine, if you will, a single reef as a thriving village square at dawn. Schools of butterfly fish flit like confetti in a gentle breeze, their spotted flanks catching the filtered sun. Lobsters scuttle sideways along crevices, antennae probing the water's secrets with the curiosity of old philosophers, while octopuses, those masters of camouflage, shift their skins from pebble gray to coral pink, blending into the backdrop as seamlessly as a sigh melts into silence. Over 4,000 species of fish alone call these waters home, alongside 800 varieties of coral and countless other forms of life, from microscopic plankton drifting like stardust to the majestic manta rays soaring overhead, their wings spanning wider than your outstretched arms. This diversity is no accident of chance, but a deliberate weave, a web of interdependencies where predator and prey, host and guest, evolve in tandem, each adaptation a thread strengthening the fabric against the pull of storms or the creep of shadows. In the reef's embrace, resilience blooms from variety, much as in the quiet gardens of our own backyards, where a single rosebush might draw bees for pollination, shelter ladybugs against aphids, and offer berries to birds come autumn, small acts compounding into an ecosystem of quiet abundance, mirroring the reef's own profound equilibrium. As the first vignette of our journey unfolds, let us linger on a dawn awakening over such a garden, where the night's velvet curtain parts to reveal the reef stirring from its slumbers, alive with the subtle symphony of renewal. The sun, that faithful alchemist, begins its ascent, its rays slicing through the surface like golden threads loosed from a loom, piercing the water column to ignite the polyps below in a cascade of awakening fluorescence. Branching corals, those elegant elkhorns with antler-like arms, extend their polyps in unison, each tiny mouth unfurling like a flower's petal at first light, capturing the planktonic feast that drifts on the incoming tide. Nearby, a moray eel retreats deeper into its crevice, its serpentine form coiling with the languor of one who has guarded the night, while parrotfish, vibrant architects in turquoise and rose, begin their rounds, their beak-like mouths grinding algae from the coral's surface, excreting fine sands that blanket the seafloor in drifts of pearl-white powder, the very stuff of tropical beaches born from breakfast. The water, warmed by the sun's tender advance, carries a faint hum, a chorus of clicks and pops from snapping shrimp hidden in sponges, their percussive greetings echoing like distant rain on a leaf-strewn path. Feel this, if you can, in the marrow of your own awakening, the reef's dawn not as a clamor, but as a gradual unveiling, where light and life entwine in a dance so unhurried it invites you to pause, to breathe into the spaces between moments, sensing how such rhythms might echo the slow bloom of your own day's potential, unfolding petal by petal, wave by wave. And now, in this moment of evocation, allow a brief pause for breath, inhale the imagined dawn's freshness to 4 counts, hold the light's quiet ignition for 4, exhale the night's lingering hush for 6, feel the unveiling settle softly, affirming, in this gradual grace, I awaken anew. And in this evocation, a relatable whisper arises, For the coral reef is not some distant myth, but a kindred spirit to the everyday havens we cultivate on land, those neighborhood gardens where wildflowers nod in the breeze beside tidy herb beds, each plot a microcosm of care and chance. Just as your local green space might shelter a bumblebee's burrow beneath a stone, a robin's nest in the hedge, and the earthy scent of turned soil after rain, so too does the reef nurture its multitude, its limestone ledges offering nooks for juvenile fish to evade the hawkish gaze of jacks, its algal lawns feeding herbivores that, in turn, fertilize the growth of new coral recruits. Consider the common sea star, that five-armed wanderer ambling across the reef's flats, its tube-feet adhering with a suction as gentle as a lover's touch, prying open bivalves to savor the tender morsels within. It is no different from the garden snail gliding over lettuce leaves, leaving a silver trail that sparkles in the dew. Or think of the cleaner wrasse, those tiny barber fish with their electric blue stripes, setting up station amid the corals to nibble parasites from the gills of larger swimmers, a service as essential and unassuming as the earthworm aerating soil for deeper roots. These parallels, drawn from the soil to the sea, remind us of our shared inheritance, the universal urge to build, to belong, to balance in the face of flux, fostering a serene recognition that the wonders we seek are often reflections of the familiar, scaled to the infinite, inviting us to carry that harmony into the hush of our beds, where sleep becomes a garden of its own, tilled by the mind's quiet tending. Yet the reef's importance extends far beyond its aesthetic allure or ecological poetry. It stands as a cornerstone of the oceans, and indeed, the planet's vitality, a guardian whose influence ripples outward like the concentric circles of a pebble dropped into still water, touching shores both literal and metaphorical. For the 275 million souls who dwell in coastal embrace, the reefs are providers of profound bounty, fisheries that yield sustenance for tables from Manila's markets to Belize's villages, their teeming populations ensuring that no family goes wanting in the lean seasons. They shield against the sea's fiercer moods, their porous structures absorbing the brunt of waves and storms, dissipating energy that might otherwise carve away at homes and hearths, much as a hedgerow buffers a cottage from winter gales, while fostering the tourism that breathes economic life into remote isles, where divers' fees fund schools and healers alike. In their depths, too, lie untold pharmacies of the future, compounds from sponges and sea squirts hinting at cures for ailments that plague our waking hours, their molecular whispers promising relief as gentle as the reef's own healing currents. And for the broader web of life, the reef's biodiversity is the ocean's insurance against uncertainty, a reservoir of genetic diversity that bolsters resilience in an era of warming waters and shifting winds, where variety becomes the quiet armor against the unforeseen. This interconnectedness, so evident in the reef's daily pageant, extends to us all, suggesting that in nurturing these submerged havens, we nurture the threads that bind our own fragile flourishing, cultural tapestries woven from indigenous lore, where reefs are sacred ancestors, economic lifelines that sustain 500 million lives across the globe, and spiritual wellsprings that evoke a sense of place, of belonging to something vaster than the self. As you lie there, listener, perhaps you felt this pull before, the way a walk along the shore stirs a deep, wordless peace, or how the sound of waves lapping at dusk coaxes forgotten tensions to ebb away. The reef embodies that essence, amplified, a reminder that our rest is not solitary, but part of an immense, ongoing conversation between land and sea, breath and current, you and the world that holds you. To deepen this immersion, let us pause now in a breathwork interlude, allowing the reef's subtle pulses to guide your own. Close your eyes if they are not already softly shuttered, and envision the water's embrace around you, not cold or confining, but buoyant, supportive, like a downy blanket drawn to your chin on a cool eve. Inhale through your nose, drawing in the faint, briny tang of the imagined sea, filling your lungs to the gentle swell of a reef wave, counting silently to 4 as the polyps extend in morning light. Hold, savoring the fullness, the quiet expansion within, for another 4, mirroring the reef's momentary poise before the tide turns. Then exhale through parted lips, a soft sigh that releases like foam dissolving on the sand, carrying forth any lingering whispers of wakefulness, for 8 full counts. In, hold, and out. Repeat this cycle thrice more, each breath layering a deeper surrender, the visual glow of dawn corals softening into the tactile warmth of sun-warmed currents against your skin, evolving now to the auditory hush of distant swells murmuring against stone, a layered progression that draws you somatically into the scene, body relaxing as mind wanders freely through the shallows. With each release, affirm inwardly, I am held by this harmony, as the reef holds its own. Emerging from this shared respiration, consider how the reef's vignettes continue to unfold in episodic grace, each one a standalone gem yet linked in the chain of wonder, revealing facets of its character that mirror our own quests for balance and beauty. Take, for instance, the fleeting ballet of a squid pulsing through the mid-water above the reef, its chromatophores flashing signals of courtship or alarm, ink-black blooms yielding to silver sheens, like the sudden flush of emotion across a face in quiet conversation, a reminder of vulnerability's role in connection. Or observe the sea cucumber, that unassuming vacuum of the seafloor, sifting sediments with its feathery oral tentacles, recycling nutrients back into the water column in an act of humble service, akin to the compost heap in your garden, transforming yesterday's leavings into tomorrow's bloom. These moments, strung like pearls on a strand, build the narrative of the reef not as a static monument, but as a living manuscript, pages turning with the moon's phases, each chapter reinforcing the theme of interdependence, how the clownfish, with its orange stripes bold as a sunset, finds immunity in the anemone's stinging embrace, darting among tentacles that would fell lesser intruders, a partnership as enduring as the trust we place in a well-worn path through familiar woods. Rhetorically, one might ponder, in such alliances, forged in the crucible of survival yet blooming into mutual grace, what echoes do we hear of our own lives, the friendships that shelter us, the routines that sustain, the quiet pacts with the world that allow us to thrive without fanfare? The reef, in its contemplative vastness, offers no pat answers, only the invitation to reflect, to let these parallels settle like silt, enriching the soil of your thoughts as you edge closer to sleep's welcoming shore. As this introductory reverie builds its context, layer by layer, the importance of the reef crystallizes further, not merely as a spectacle for the curious eye, but as a philosophical touchstone, gently urging us toward a worldview where fragility and fortitude entwine like vines on a trellis. Its biodiversity, that awe-inspiring profusion, serves as the ocean's greatest teacher of resilience, a mosaic where no single tile dominates, yet all contribute to the enduring pattern. In the face of bleaching events or invasive currents, it is this variety that allows pockets of life to rebound, recolonizing barren arms with fresh polyps and opportunistic settlers, much as a forest regrows from the stubborn seeds scattered in ash. For humanity, too, the stakes are woven intimately. These reefs underpin economies through sustainable harvests and ecotourism, their allure drawing travelers who, in turn, fund protections that echo back to coastal guardians, creating a ripple of reciprocity that spans from divers' mast to policymakers' table. And in the quieter realms of the heart, they foster a sense of interconnected wonder, a serene empowerment that whispers, "You are not adrift, but part of this grand, breathing whole, your rest tonight a microcosm of the reef's nocturnal hush, where bioluminescent plankton flicker like fireflies in the dark, illuminating paths unseen." Everyday experiences amplify this truth, the comfort of a shared meal with loved ones, drawn from the sea's generosity, the solace of a beachside stroll, buffered by the reef's unseen vigilance, the simple joy of watching clouds mirror waves, reminding us of skies and seas in eternal dialogue. These ties, subtle yet profound, elevate the reef from curiosity to companion, an entity whose preservation invites us to gentle stewardship, not through grand gestures, but through mindful presence, carrying its lessons into dreams where barriers dissolve and all flows as one. In this unfolding overview, the vignettes multiply, each a portal to deeper immersion, standalone yet sequentially bound, painting the reef as a realm of endless revelation. Envision a midday interlude, where sunlight shafts pillar downward like divine spotlights, illuminating the reef's mid-strata, feather duster worms, those crimson sentinels, retracting at the shadow of a passing grouper, their plumes re-emerging moments later in a gesture of tentative trust, evocative of the way we, too, venture forth after pause, testing the air for safety before full extension. Or trace the path of a juvenile trumpetfish, elongating its slender form to mimic the spines of a lionfish, slipping unnoticed through the throng, a clever ruse born of necessity, paralleling the adaptive guises we don in daily navigations, from polite smiles at gatherings to the inner armor against unseen currents of doubt. Such episodes, rendered in the mind's slow cinema, build a rhythm of revelation, repetitive in their reinforcement of unity, life upon life, color upon color, secret upon secret, each vignette a brushstroke in the larger portrait of the reef's enduring allure. And as sensory layers progress, from the initial visual blaze of dawn's palette, now warming into the tactile silk of water gliding over imagined skin, hinting at the faint prickle of planktonic encounters, to the emerging auditory veil of muffled bubbles rising like sighs from the depths, the immersion deepens, somatic relaxation unfurling like a fern in morning mist, body softening, mind adrift in the current's lull. Yet even as we savor these glimpses, a subtle irony touches the tale. The reef, so robust in appearance with its fortress of stone, thrives on the most delicate of balances, a fact that underscores its philosophical grace, teaching surrender amid strength. Its polyps, those foundational artisans, extend only under the moon's protective veil or the sun's nourishing gaze, retracting at the hint of turmoil, a vulnerability that endears rather than diminishes, reminding us that true power often resides in flexibility, the bend before the break, the retreat that ensures return. In everyday echoes, this resonates, the way a river stone, smoothed by ceaseless flow, outlasts the cliff from which it fell, or how, in your own evenings, yielding to the pull of pillows yields a deeper restoration than resistance ever could. Rhetorically engaged, we might ask, if the reef's grandeur springs from such tender concessions, what spaces in our nights might we soften, allowing the day's debris to settle as naturally as sediment in a tidal pool? The answer, unhurried and open, invites reflection, a pause where affirmation blooms. Yes, in this yielding, wonder awaits, serene and sustaining. As the sun filters through these ancient branches, warming the water to a caress that permeates every crevice and frond, what secrets of growth lie hidden in the slow embrace of the sea, where stone dreams into form and life claims its quiet dominion? Let this question linger, a soft bridge to the forge below, as your breath continues its ocean mimicry, drawing you ever deeper into the reef's timeless song. Within the veiled hush where sunlight fractures into shimmering veils that settle from the muffled bubbles of dawn's sighs into the cool firmness of nascent forms below, dappling them with promises of permanence, the sea's ancient artistry reveals itself not in sudden strokes, but in the infinitesimal labors of those humble polyps, the unassuming progenitors whose daily devotions forge the enduring spines of the reef. These delicate architects, each no larger than a grain of rice, measuring a mere 1 to 3 millimeters across, their translucent bodies pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a distant star, extend their gossamer tentacles into the current at twilight's edge, ensnaring microscopic morsels that sustain their quiet crusade. In this ritual, as unhurried as the settling of dew on a fern frond, they draw from the seawater's dissolved bounty, calcium ions mingling with carbonates in a dreamy alchemy that mirrors the slow fusion of elements in a potter's kiln, solidifying them into crystalline aragonite frameworks, hard and luminous, that cradle their soft forms against the ocean's whims. Layer upon layer, these secretions accumulate, a testament to persistence where each polyp's contribution, though fleeting in the span of a human breath, compounds over seasons and centuries into the monumental boughs that branch skyward, defying the weight of water to pierce the light above. It is here, in the silent forge of calcification, that the reef's foundation takes shape, a process as vital and veiled as the roots of a great oak delving into Earth's dark embrace, drawing unseen nourishment to sustain the canopy's verdant reach, reminding us that what appears a steadfast stone is, in truth, the accumulated exhale of lives too numerous to name, much like the family stories passed down through generations in coastal villages, each tale a small stone added to the hearth's enduring warmth. Envision, then, the life cycle of a single coral polyp as the first vignette in this episodic unfolding, a standalone chronicle of creation that stands alone yet echoes the chorus of its kin, painting the reef's birth in strokes of patient wonder. Born from the larval drift of a parent colony, tiny, free-floating specks no wider than a pinprick, propelled by the sea's gentle gyres until they settle upon a suitable substrate, be it the weathered remnant of an older reef or the volcanic ledge of a newborn island. These settlers metamorphose in a moment of profound transition, anchoring themselves with adhesive threads and commencing their skeletal vigil. Within hours, the polyp begins its work, its body contracting and expanding in rhythmic pulses synchronized to the tidal lullaby, extracting calcium from the surrounding brine through specialized cells that function like living sieves, filtering and fusing the minerals into a cup-shaped exoskeleton that grows incrementally, millimeter by millimeter, toward the sun's beckoning rays. Over weeks, this solitary builder divides asexually, budding forth clones in a clonal cascade that spreads across the surface like frost etching a window pane in winter's hush, each new polyp inheriting the parent's form, yet adapting subtly to the microcurrents that swirl around their shared perch, their tentacles waving in unison like a field of wheat bending to an unseen wind. In this budding ballet, vulnerability yields to multiplicity. What begins as one fragile sentinel blossoms into a clonal thicket, the colony's surface alive with the synchronized opening and closing of polyps at dawn and dusk, a communal respiration that feeds the growing edifice below. Feel the tactile emergence of this stone garden in your own quieting form, the imagined cool firmness of the limestone base pressing upward, a grounding weight that steadies the sway of fronds above, evolving from the visual spark of mineral nucleation, those fleeting glimmers as crystals lattice in the polyp's core, to the substantial heft of accumulated mass, as if your palms cupped the slow-heaving chest of the earth itself, reassuring in its unyielding poise, much like the steady rhythm of a shared family recipe, passed hand to hand across kitchen tables, each stir building flavor from simple starts. This foundational rhythm, so meticulously etched in the polyp's daily decree, demands cradles of exquisite precision, environmental sanctuaries where the sea's temperament aligns in harmonious consent, allowing the alchemy of growth to proceed without interruption. Shallow expanses, no deeper than the height of a standing child, typically between 3 and 50 feet from the surface, provide the canvas where sunlight penetrates unfiltered to fuel the symbiotic algae nestled within each polyp's tissues, those golden zooxanthellae that photosynthesize in exchange for shelter, lending their emerald vigor to the host's calcium forge. Waters must remain balmy, hovering in the embrace of 77 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, a tropical bath drawn from the equator's generous fold, for colder currents would slow the chemical dance to a lethargic crawl, while excessive heat might hasten expulsion of the algal partners, leaving the polyps pallid and adrift. Clear, nutrient-sparse seas prevail here, free from the silty murk of river outflows or the turbid churn of upwellings, ensuring that the polyp's filters remain unclogged and the light's path unobscured, much like a glade in an old forest where dappled beams coax wildflowers from the loam without the smother of underbrush. And beneath it all, the sea's mineral larder must abound, dissolved calcium concentrations elevated by the dissolution of ancient shells and the exhalations of distant volcanoes, sustaining the relentless pull of calcification, a process that consumes carbon dioxide in its wake, subtly tempering the ocean's breath in ways that ripple toward the air we share, just as the monsoon rains in those equatorial villages refresh the parched fields, carrying minerals from mountain mists to the soil's waiting roots. These conditions, so finely tuned, evoke a gentle philosophy of alignment, just as the reef thrives in the confluence of warmth, light, and clarity, so might our own evenings find deeper repose when we attune to the subtle confluence of breath, quiet, and release, allowing the day's disparate threads to weave into night's seamless whole. Delving deeper into the explanatory weave, consider the geological timelines that frame this creation as a slow-motion ballet across epochs, where the reef's lineage traces back through the strata of time, a narrative of endurance etched in limestone ledgers that outlast empires and ice ages alike. The earliest whispers of reef-like realms echo from the dawn of complex life, some 542 million years ago in the Cambrian's verdant prelude, when calcareous algae and enigmatic archaeocyathids, small, cup-shaped sponges of forgotten grace, first conjured calcified mounds in shallow Paleozoic seas, precursors to the stony fortresses we revere today. True scleractinian corals, the hard skeleton builders of modern lore, emerged only in the Triasic's forge, some 240 million years past, rising phoenix-like from the Permian extinction's ashes to claim the sunlit shelves with their branching audacity, their polyps pioneering the mass-spawning synchronies that seed vast colonies in a single, moonlit surge. And now, in this epochal emergence, allow a brief pause for breath. Inhale the ancient air's imagined warmth to 3 counts, hold the phoenix's resilient pause for 3, exhale the ashes' fading hush for 5, feel the pioneering surge settle softly, affirming, in this rising from remnants, I reclaim my own renewal. Over the Mesozoic's languid span, these pioneers proliferated, their skeletons accumulating at rates of mere millimeters per year, yet compounding, in the patient arithmetic of geology, to form barriers that spanned continents, only to be sculpted by Pleistocene glaciations into the fringing wonders of today's tropics. The Great Barrier Reef itself, that sprawling sentinel off Australia's coast, began its current incarnation a mere 500,000 years ago, its layers preserving snapshots of climatic caprice, thicker bands from interglacial thaws, thinner from the chill of advances, each stratum a diary of the planet's fevered dreams. Layer upon layer, does this not echo our own quiet build, where past pressures shape present poise? This timeline unfolds not as a linear march, but as a cyclical sonata, where retreat and resurgence mirror the reef's innate resilience, the capacity to recolonize barren platforms with larval clouds, rebuilding what tempests or time have torn asunder, much like the perennial regreening of a hillside after winter's scourge. In contemplating such vastness, a quiet insight stirs. Our own spans, though brief against this canvas, contribute to legacies unseen, each choice a polyp's secretion, building towards structures that shelter long after we have dissolved into the current. To ground this grandeur in the tactile and familiar, let everyday analogies bloom like polyps from a shared branch, illuminating the reef's genesis through lenses we all have held. Picture a child's sandcastle on a receding beach, towers and moats rising from damp grains under small hands press, ephemeral, yet echoing the polyp's initial molding of wet sediment into form, where each pat and pile anticipates the tide's inevitable reclaim, teaching the builder humility in creation's flux. Or envision the dripstone caverns of your local karst, where mineral-laden water seeps through ceilings in ceaseless tears, depositing calcite veils that lengthen inch by inch over lifetimes, their translucent curtains a subterranean homage to the reef's submerged spires, both born of solution and solidification in realms of perpetual dim. Even the humble oyster bed in a brackish estuary offers kinship, its mollusks layering nacreous coats upon irritants to birth pearls of iridescent quietude, a microcosm of calcification's gift, transforming intrusion into ornament, vulnerability into veiled strength. These terrestrial twins, drawn from the soil and shore we tread, whisper of universal processes, the seas forge no outlier, but kin to the earth's quiet sculpting everywhere, inviting you, in the softening hush of your chamber, to sense the same alchemy at work within, the gradual hardening of resolve from fluid thought, the patient accrual of habits that fortify the spirit's hidden reefs against night's subtle tides, much like the evening ritual of journaling in a fisherman's hut, where daily drifts are distilled into durable dreams. As these threads of formation interlace, a second vignette emerges, standalone in its intimacy yet bound to the first by the repetitive cadence of growth's refrain, chronicling the ascent of a branching acropora colony from larval landing to arboreal grace, a tale of vertical ambition in horizontal seas. Settling upon a rubble-strewn flat amid the Indo-Pacific's azure haze, the initial polyps cluster in a modest disk, their skeletons fusing edge to edge in a living mortar that spreads radially, outward and upward, as if the seafloor itself yearns for the light's caress. Year one brings a low mound, polyps numbering in the dozens, their tentacles foraging in synchronized sweeps that stir the water into nutrient eddies. By the fifth season, axial branches erupt, slender and sharp as new shoots from a sapling's crown, each internode a repository of yearly growth, etched with the scars of grazing urchins or the polish of abrasive sands. Decades unfold in this ascent, the colony reaching waist height by the 20th year, its form a fractal filigree that fractures currents into lace-like flows, sheltering juvenile snails in its lower boughs while exposing upper tiers to the planktonic rain. Sensory layers deepen here, the visual effervescence of calcification sparks, microscopic efflorescences as crystals precipitate, like stars igniting in a velvet void, yielding to the tactile solidity of the branch's girth, a heft that resists the probing touch of a current's finger, grounding the listener's imagined drift in the reassuring density of accumulated time. Through storm and serenity, this acropore endures, its polyps retracting in the cyclone's lash only to re-emerge, budding afresh, layer upon layer reinforcing the architecture against collapse, a quiet empowerment that echoes in our own rebuildings, where fractures mend stronger, and persistence carves beauty from adversity's raw edge, akin to the way island elders recount typhoon tales around evening fires, each survival story a branch extended to the next generation's grasp. Yet no forge burns without its pauses for reflection, and so we interweave a breathwork interlude now, 30 seconds of guided surrender to honor the polyp's methodical poise, allowing the weight of stone to settle somatically within. Settle deeper into your repose, limbs heavy as submerged ledges, and attune your inhalation to the sea's mineral draw. Breathe in through the nose, envisioning the calcium ions swirling into the polyp's chamber, a cool influx that fills to 4 counts, expanding the chest like a budding skeleton seeking light. Hold for 4, savoring the crystalline pause, the alchemy's hush where elements entwine. Exhale for 8, releasing as the carbonate lattice forms, a softening outflow that eases the shoulders, the jaw, the furrowed brow, carrying forth the residue of wakeful striving. In, hold, out. Twice more, each cycle layering the tactile impression of growing stone, from the initial prickle of nucleation against the palate of the mind, to the firm, unyielding anchor in the belly's core, affirming with each release, in this building, I find my steady ground, resilient and rooted. Emerge refreshed, the auditory undercurrent now murmuring faintly, a low thrum of settling particles like distant footsteps on gravel, bridging the visual tactile progression toward the reef's burgeoning chorus. From this anchored calm, the third vignette arises, interconnected through the motif of clonal expansion yet distinct in its temporal sweep, tracing a fringing reef's genesis along a weathered shoreline, where volcanic basalt yields dibiogenic bloom over millennia's patient vigil. In the wake of an eruption's fiery tantrum, say, off Hawaii's rugged flanks some 10,000 years prior, The cooling lava shelves into jagged platforms, barren and black under the moon's indifferent gaze, until the first coral larvae, wafted on trade winds' wings, alight upon the cracks, their polyps commencing the reclamation with fervent delicacy. Initial growth is tentative, a patchwork of encrusting montipora-forming low veneers that trap sand and shell fragments, stabilizing the substrate against erosion's gnaw. Centuries pass, and tabletop Poecilipara arise, their flat crowns ensnaring debris to elevate the structure, creating lagoons of placid blue where mangroves later root their aerial props. By the reef's adolescence, 5 millennia in, emergent knolls pierce the shallows, polyps laboring in their thousands to erect buttresses that channel waves into harmless foams, the entire edifice advancing seaward at a snail's pace, mere centimeters annually, reclaiming drowned lands in a serene counter to the ocean's advance. This historical arc, a standalone epic of transformation, reinforces the refrain, life upon life, sediment upon skeleton, each increment a ripple in the reef's expansive narrative, fostering awe at nature's unhurried dominion. Relatable in its echo of homesteads built from wilderness, the pioneer's cabin rising log by log on untamed prairie, these origins remind us of our capacity for such patient claiming, turning voids into verdant holds, whether in garden plots or the inner landscapes we till through nightly reflection, much like the way Pacific Islanders rebuild after storms, weaving thatched roofs from fallen fronds, each not a nod to the land's lasting lessons. In the contemplative shadow of these growth tales, denser concepts invite a guided pause, a moment to let the implications of calcification's cadence resonate, building rhythm through repetition as we circle back to the polyp's primordial pulse. Consider how this process, so elemental in its chemistry, carbon dioxide absorbed, bicarbonate ions shuttled, enzymes catalyzing the precipitation in vacuoles that mimic tiny laboratories within the polyp's flesh, sustains not just the individual, but the collective's ascent, each secretion a vote for continuity in the democracy of the deep. Rhetorically, one might muse, if such minuteness yields monuments that span seas, what quiet accretions in our own rhythms, the nightly rehearsal of gratitude, the incremental softening of grudges, might erect unseen bulwarks against the tempests of tomorrow? The reef offers no decree, only the invitation to mirror its method, deliberate, accretive, attuned to the medium's gifts. Everyday experiences amplify this, the slow leavening of bread dough overnight, gases and glutens weaving into resilient crumb, or the incremental layering of a quilt, stitch by stitch binding fabrics into warmth's embrace, humble parallels that demystify the miracle, rendering the sea's forge accessible, motivational in its whisper that endurance is not heroic, but habitual, a serene path to empowerment where each layer fortifies the whole. As these vignettes converge in their shared devotion to building, the sensory progression completes its arc, from the effulgent sparks of mineral birth, now fully embodied in the substantial, tactile mass of the reef's foundational stone, a weight that grounds yet liberates, allowing branches to aspire unburdened. The narrative rhythm swirls with interconnected explanations of ripple effects, how a single colony's expansion alters local flows, funneling nutrients to downstream kin, or how ancient reefs, uplifted by tectonics, become today's island cores, their fossils whispering of climates long faded. Subtle irony touches here, in the observation that these indomitable structures, born of the softest intent, crumble only under neglect's weight, their dissolution a cautionary poetry on the balance of nurture and nature. Yet uplift prevails, the emotional tone serene in its assurance that such forges endure, fostering peaceful discovery in the listener's drift. Within these sturdy frames, forged layer upon layer in the sea's unyielding kiln, how does the pulse of countless beings find harmony, their hidden hums rising like a subterranean hymn to weave the stone with symphony? In the veiled chambers of those limestone spires, where the sea's patient forge yields to a more vivacious cadence, the pulse of harmony reveals itself not in solitary echoes, but in the multifaceted murmur of 1,000 lives entwined, a biodiversity so profound it transforms the reef from static sanctuary to a breathing agora, where every niche pulses with purpose and every current carries a chorus of quiet interdependence. Here, within the labyrinthine lee of branching arms and the shadowed vaults of overhangs, resides a quarter of the ocean's known species, over 1 million forms of finned, shelled, and tentacled kin crowding into less than 1% of the seafloor's domain, their collective rhythm a testament to the reef's magnetic allure, drawing wanderers from the open blue to find refuge, repast, and renewal in its embrace. Imagine this teeming heart as the reef's unspoken manifesto, diversity not as exuberant chaos, but as the serene strategy for endurance, where multiplicity begets strength, much like the varied threads in a woven blanket that together ward off the night's chill, each filament essential to the warmth that envelops. In this web, the philosophical undercurrent flows gently, reminding us that our own existences, with their tangled affiliations and fleeting encounters, mirror this underwater congress, empowering a sense of belonging that soothes the soul's solitary drift, inviting you to sense, in the softening hush of your form, how such interconnectedness might cradle your own rhythms into deeper, more harmonious repose. As the episodic unveiling progresses, let the first spotlight fall upon the parrotfish, those resplendent gardeners of the reef's verdant lawns, There forms a riot of turquoise and rose-scaled in iridescent armor, cruising the shallows with the deliberate grace of a groundskeeper tending an eternal estate. Daybreak finds them awakening in crevices of table corals, their fused dental plates, beak-like and unyielding, poised for the morning's toil, rasping across algal films with a sound like the faint scrape of a brush on canvas, exfoliating the surfaces to prevent overgrowth that might smother the polyps below. In this labor, they consume up to 5 times their body weight daily, their digestive churn transforming tough greens into fine, white sands that sift downward like confectioner's dust, blanketing the lagoon floors and birthing the powdery beaches that fringe tropical idylls, a ripple effect where one creature's repast sculpts the very shores we recline upon at dusk. Schools of these jewel-toned herbivores weave through staghorn thickets, their grazing paths carving corridors that invite smaller fish to dart in their wake, gleaning dislodged morsels from the stirred plume, a communal harvest born of individual industry. Feel the visual kaleidoscope ignite here, the parrotfish's flanks shimmering in fractured sunbeams, scales fracturing light into azure flecks that dance across the coral's ochre ridges, evoking the vibrant patchwork of a sunlit mosaic, where each tile, each scale, contributes to a pattern of profound, unspoken coordination. Yet this guardianship extends beyond the tangible. By curbing algal dominance, the parrotfish safeguard the reef's foundational light, their nightly slumbers in mucus cocoons, a gelatinous shroud spun to evade predators, mirroring the human ritual of drawing covers close, a vulnerable retreat that renews the dawn's vigor, fostering in us a quiet awe at nature's parallel sanctuaries for rest and renewal. Shifting sequentially to the swaying sentinels of the anemone, those ethereal clusters rooted in the reef's sandy interstices, their tentacles undulate like living banners in the current's sigh, each frond a bouquet of muted mauves and ivories that belies the sting concealed within, nematocysts primed to paralyze the unwary, yet offering asylum to select companions in a pact as ancient as the tides. These floral guardians, kin to the jelly's drift but anchored in polyp persistence, expand by day to ensnare drifting zooplankton, their oral discs pulsing faintly with captured feasts, while at twilight they contract into compact orbs, conserving energy in the moon's silver vigil. In their midst, the clownfish, those bold orange minstrels striped in ebony and white, navigate the barbs with impunity, their dermal mucus a chemical diplomacy that renders the stings innocuous, allowing them to police the anemone's perimeter against butterflyfish intruders, nipping at intruders' fins in zealous defense. This duo's daily choreography, a dance of mutual vigilance where the fish aerates the host's tissues with oxygenated sweeps and the anemone shields the family from jacks and snappers, exemplifies the reef's web of quiet empowerment. One entity's haven becomes another's stronghold, a reminder that our own alliances, forged in the subtle negotiations of proximity and trust, weave similar tapestries of support. Sensory layers evolve now, from the anemone's visual sway, a hypnotic ripple that blurs the boundary between flora and fauna, petals parting like whispers in a breeze, to the nascent auditory hush of tentacle fronds brushing against one another, a silken susurrus akin to silk sheets settling over a sleeper, drawing the listener deeper into somatic ease, where the body's subtle undulations sync with the scene's unhurried flow. To vary the rhythm with shorter fact bursts, consider these list-like glimpses into the reef's invertebrate orchestra, each a staccato note in the symphony's swell. The spiny lobster, armored in nocturnal crimson, scuttles sideways through boulder fields at dusk, antennae whisking the water for chemical cues, its migrations carving nocturnal highways that juvenile fish trail for safety's shadow. The chambered nautilus and crown of thorns starfish, the former a shelled relic drifting with its pearly spiral buoyed by gas, the latter a thorned predator devouring polyps in enzymatic dissolution to balance abundance, their unchecked blooms whispering cautionary tales of equilibrium's edge. The pistol shrimp, burrowed in rubble pairs, snaps its claw with hydraulic fury to stun prey in cavitation bubbles, the resulting crack, a sonic boom muffled by water, serving as marital Morse code, echoing through the reef like a distant, percussive heartbeat. Pause here, let the prickle settle. These bursts, repetitive in their revelation of niche mastery, reinforce the motif of layered lives, scavenger upon grazer, predator upon prey, each role a filament in the reef's resilient weave, evoking everyday echoes. The ant colony's industrious march across kitchen counters, the bird flock's aerial ballet at feeder trays, reminders of how diversity's quiet industry sustains the familiar worlds we inhabit, uplifting the spirit with the insight that no existence stands alone. Emerging from these staccato sketches, the third vignette spotlights the damselfish, those feisty azure wardens of algal turfs, patrolling their claimed patches of reef with the territorial fervor of a homeowner clipping hedges, their iridescent bodies darting in short, accusatory bursts to chase off grazing rivals, ensuring their nursery of eggs, laid in meticulous scrapes on coral rubble, hatches under vigilant guard. Over 4,000 fish species grace the reefs in total, from the languid nurse shark gliding through canyons like a submerged zephyr to the razor-sharp remerers hitching rides on turtles' shells, their suction discs a clever commute that spares energy for opportunistic feeds. The damselfish's domain, A modest square meter of green fuzz becomes a micro-ecosystem unto itself, attracting copepods and amphipods that the fry devour upon emergence, their silver sides flashing in the sun's dapple as they school outward, imprinting the reef's contours into muscle memory. This parental poise, fierce yet fleeting, males fanning eggs with pectoral flutters to oxygenate the clutch, mouths sucking away fungal threats, mirrors the tender vigils of our own nesting instincts, the midnight checks on a child's breath or the habitual smoothing of a rumpled bed, fostering a serene recognition that guardianship, in sea or hearth, blooms from love's unassuming labor. Visually, the scene kaleidoscopes further, schools fracturing light into prismatic shards, bodies banking in unison like leaves in a zephyr, a living lens that magnifies the reef's chromatic depth, from the damselfish's electric cobalt to the subtler indigos of lurking tangs. A fourth vignette draws the eye to the octopus, that enigmatic shapeshifter of the reef's twilight zones, its 8-armed silhouette unfolding from a den in brain coral's labyrinthine folds, skin rippling through palettes of gravel gray to polyp pink in chameleonic camouflage, a mastery of mimicry that blurs self into surroundings as effortlessly as mist merges with morn. By night, this cephalopod savant ventures forth, jet propelling across the benthos to ensnare crabs in radial grapples, its beak-piercing shells with enzymatic precision, while by day it retreats to ponderous idleness, one arm curled over an eye like a sentinel's hood, conserving the reef's nocturnal bounty for diurnal dreams. Over 800 coral varieties provide the stage for such solos, from massive brain corals ridged like contemplative brows to delicate sea fans fanning the flow, each hosting octopodal lairs where tools of coconut husks or shells serve as portable shields, a testament to invertebrate ingenuity that rivals our own opportunistic crafts. The octopus's solitary soirees, punctuated by ink clouds loosed in evasion, evoke the philosophical solitude within community, the reef's vast throng allowing pockets of introspection, much as a crowded avenue yields alcoves for quiet reflection, empowering the listener with the uplifting truth that even in entanglement, autonomy thrives, a quiet insight that eases the mind toward sleep's enveloping fold. Auditory elements stir subtly now. The octopus's siphon pulses a muffled whoosh against the growing chorus, fin flicks of passing surgeonfish whispering like pages turned in a leather-bound tome, shell clinks of foraging hermit crabs a delicate percussion that layers the immersion, drawing breath and beat into unified hush. To honor this burgeoning multiplicity with a breathwork interlude of 40 seconds, pause here in guided attunement, letting the reef's teeming pulse resonate somatically, a bridge from the visual riot to the auditory veil that cocoons your drift. Recline deeper, If you will, spine aligning with the imagined seafloor's subtle yield, and draw your next inhalation through the nose, envisioning the influx of a school, color and motion swelling your chest to 5 counts, the kaleidoscope expanding within like a blooming medusa. Hold for 5, cradling the diversity's hum, the harmonious hold where individual notes blend into chord. Exhale for 10, a languid release that scatters like a dispersing cloud of fish, carrying forth any residual stirrings of separation, affirming thrice in the outflow. In this web, I am woven, serene and whole. In, hold, out. Repeat the cycle, each breath evolving the sensory tapestry, from the vibrant press of bodies glimpsed in mind's eye, now softening into the tactile brush of currents parting around form, to the faint, enveloping susurrus of the chorus, fin against frond, a lullaby that sinks into bones, fostering deeper immersion where body and reef respire as one. Refreshed in this shared cadence, the 5th vignette illuminates the manta ray, that aerialist of the reef's upper realms, its wingspan unfurling to 9 feet of ebony silk veined in ghostly white, gliding overhead in parabolic arcs that filter plankton through gill rakers like a baleen sieve, somersaulting in balletic rolls to maximize the harvest from sunlit strata. These gentle leviathans, numbering among the reef's charismatic megafauna alongside green sea turtles cropping seagrass meadows and eagle rays undulating through sand flats, migrate seasonally to cleaning stations where wrasse nibble ectoparasites from their underbellies, a ritual of reciprocal grooming that underscores the reef's egalitarian ethos. The manta's passage stirs a bow wave that cascades downward, delivering nutrient flurries to the benthos below, a top-down largesse that fertilizes the very polyps that birthed the structure, a ripple effect cascading through strata, from pelagic grace to benthic bloom. Affirm, in this majestic sweep, I flow with the flurries. In this, a rhetorical whisper arises, if such majestic sweeps sustain the subtle foundations, what unseen currents in our days, a kind word rippling outward, a moment's pause nurturing kin, might echo similarly, fostering chains of quiet uplift that bind the personal to the profound? The reef, in its contemplative congress, invites such musings without demand, its diversity a motivational mirror. Over 7,000 species of fishes alone, from the cryptic gobies guarding rubble realms to the trumpetfish elongating and lionfish guises, each adaptation a verse in the ode to coexistence, evoking shared human experiences, the neighborhood potluck where disparate flavors harmonize, the chorus of voices in a twilight song, reminders that wonder flourishes in the aggregate, serene and sustaining. As these spotlights sequence into a luminous chain, the descriptive prose swells with awe at the reef's biodiversity as a whole, 800 coral species alone, from the encrusting Montipora veneering ledges to the lettuce coral's ruffled lobes, waving like submerged salads, providing the architectural canvas upon which this menagerie paints its daily fresco. Invertebrates abound in uncharted profusion, from bioluminescent comb jellies pulsing ethereal blues in night dives to nudibranchs trailing iridescent wakes. Their toxic ingestions turn to defensive flaunts. Sea turtles nestle into bays, their carapaces barnacled with commensal hitchhikers, while birds like frigate birds will overhead, scavenging windfalls, and marine mammals from dolphins porpoising at the drop-off to dugongs, grazing adjacent seagrasses, orbit the periphery, drawn by the reef's gravitational pull of plenty. This profusion, a wonder-filled web where herbivores sculpt space for algae-dependent detritivores, and predators cull the weak to hone the herd's acuity, builds an ecosystem of exquisite equipoise, gently philosophical in its implication, diversity as the quiet architect of resilience, empowering not through dominance but diffusion, a lesson that permeates the listener's evening unwind, suggesting that in embracing our own varied threads, the introvert's reflection, the extrovert's spark, we cultivate inner reefs of enduring calm. Yet amid this uplift, a subtle irony graces the tale. The reef's clamor of life thrives in such confined quarters, a bustling metropolis in a thimble's span, where territorial spats flare in finned furies only to dissolve in schooling synchrony, much like the human hive's harmonious hum beneath surface frictions. Repetition reinforces the theme, life upon life, niche upon niche, as shorter bursts cascade. The blenny's periscopic stare from a hole, head protruding like a meerkat's scout, the filefish's elongated snout probing crevices for sponges, a living vacuum in the detritus dance, the triggerfish's wedge-tailed wedges into sand to unearth bivalves, their grunts a basso profundo in the soundscape. These glimpses, interconnected in their revelation of specialization, evoke the reef's motivational core. In variety lies not fragmentation, but fortitude, a serene discovery that invites rhetorical engagement. What hidden harmonies might stir within your own circle, the overlooked allies that fortify the familiar? Bridging the personal to the pelagic with unhurried grace. Each flicker of scale, each glide of tentacle, a thread in the greater tapestry that shimmers with shared intent. But what fuels this dance at its core? The invisible exchanges that bind light to shadow in perpetual, life-affirming grace, a hush that yields to the unseen exchanges below. In the luminous weave where flickers of scale and glides of tentacle converge into a tapestry of shared intent, a hush that yields to the unseen exchanges below, the core of this underwater ballet pulses with an invisible grace, a sacred exchange that binds the reef's myriad souls not through overt proclamations, but through the subtle alchemy of give and receive, where light cascades into life and shadow yields to sustenance in a perpetual, life-affirming reciprocity. At the heart of this harmony lies the profound partnership between coral polyps and their sun-kissed companions, the microscopic algae known as zooxanthellae, golden-hued dinoflagellates, no larger than the period at the end of this sentence, that nestle within the coral's translucent cells like devoted scribes illuminating ancient manuscripts with threads of emerald vitality. These algal allies, residing in densities of up to 1 million per square centimeter of coral tissue, harness the sun's filtered bounty through photosynthesis, a gentle miracle wherein they transmute seawater's dissolved carbon dioxide and the hydrogen from split water molecules into energy-rich sugars, glucose and glycerol among them, that flow outward to nourish the host polyp, fueling its ceaseless labor of skeleton building and tentacle extension. In return, the coral offers a haven of protection, shuttling its own metabolic cast-offs, ammonia and phosphates gleaned from captured prey, back to the algae as fertilizer for their photosynthetic forge, while its opaque body shields them from the sea's churning turbulence, a mutual breath where the polyp's exhalations become the algal inhale, and vice versa, sustaining a cycle as intimate and essential as the quiet dialogue between heart and lung in your own chest, rising and falling in unnoticed unity. This symbiosis, forged over evolutionary epochs since the Triasic's dawn some 240 million years ago, elevates the reef from mere habitat to a living covenant, where 90% of the coral's nutritional needs derive not from the hunt, but from this internalized sun, empowering a resilience that whispers to us, in our deepest bonds, too, lies the power to thrive through shared essence, turning individual vulnerabilities into collective fortitude. Envision, as the first vignette in this chain of relational revelations unfolds, a standalone ode to the daily rite of exchange in a thriving acropora thicket off Fiji's sun-drenched fringes, how dawn's oblique rays pierce the canopy above, igniting the zooxanthellae into fervent industry within the polyp's embrace, their chlorophyll-laden forms absorbing photons in a cascade of quantum whispers, splitting water to liberate oxygen that bubbles faintly upward like effervescent prayers, while the resultant carbohydrates pulse through cellular membranes to swell the coral's girth, enabling the budding of fresh branches that arch toward the light like supplicants in a verdant cathedral. By midday, this internal harvest peaks, the algae's bounty, glycerol slick as honey, amino acids sharp as secret confidences, sustaining the polyp through the heat's languid haze, even as the host reciprocates with nitrogenous gifts drawn from nocturnal plankton hauls, a nocturnal vigil where tentacles splay like open palms to gather the sea's nocturnal manna. Give and receive, does this not echo the quiet loans between lifelong companions, one offering shelter in storm, the other sustenance in scarcity? The refrain echoes in the colony's synchronized pulse, polyps contracting in unison at the sun's zenith to shade their algal tenants from excess glare, then unfurling at dusk to reclaim the twilight's cooler kiss, their partnership a model of serene interdependence that mirrors the lifelong friendships we cherish, the quiet lending of strength in weary hours, the unspoken sharing of burdens that lightens both bearers, fostering in the listener a profound uplift, a reminder that such invisible threads, woven with mutual care, can anchor the spirit against the swells of solitude, inviting deeper repose in the knowledge of connections unseen yet unfailingly present. This foundational bond, so elegantly balanced, extends its tendrils beyond the coral-algal duo to envelop the reef in a broader web of symbiotic graces, where other alliances bloom in episodic harmony, each a vignette reinforcing the theme of reciprocal empowerment. Consider the cleaner wrasse, those diminutive barbers of the blue, libret-like fish no longer than your thumb, striped in electric azure and yellow like living safety vests, establishing cleaning stations amid the coral's nooks, where larger denizens, from moray eels coiled in crevices to humpbacked parrotfish lumbering past, submit to ritualistic inspections, parting gills and fins to allow the wrasse's probing mouths to excise parasites and dead tissue in a flurry of nibbles that gleam like surgical precision under the water's prism. In this exchange, the client fish gain hygiene and health, their burdens lightened without the toll of self-grooming, while the wrasse feasts on the gleaned bounty, its bold signals, head shakes and fin flares, proclaiming the station's openness like a village well's welcoming call. Even predators pause their hunts, a temporary truce born of trust, underscoring the reef's philosophical ethos, vulnerability, when met with reciprocity, begets safety, much as in the human circle where a candid confession invites empathy's balm, healing wounds we scarcely knew we carried. Sensory layers deepen here, from the auditory veil of fin flicks now evolving into the tactile intimacy of the wrasse's featherlight touches, imagined as a soft graze along the listener's forearm, currents carrying the echo of scales brushing scale, to the subtle visual sparkle of freed parasites drifting away like confetti in a gentle updraft, drawing the body into a somatic loosening, where tensions mimic the eel's uncoiling sigh, breath easing into the rhythm of mutual release. Yet no sacred exchange unfolds without its shadows, and so the second vignette emerges, interconnected through the motif of give and receive yet shadowed by rupture, chronicling a bleaching heartache in the shallows of the Maldives, where a sudden surge in sea temperatures, merely 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above the seasonal norm, sustained for weeks, triggers a cascade of distress within the coral's inner sanctum. The zooxanthellae, overwhelmed by the heat's feverish grip, ceasing their photosynthetic labors as enzymes falter and reactive oxygen species proliferate like unbidden thorns, prompting the polyps to expel their algal partners in a desperate purge, leaving the once vibrant branches pallid and ghostly, as if the color had leached away in a melancholic tide. This expulsion, a reflexive severance akin to a heartbroken farewell where familiarity turns to foe, starves the coral of its primary sustenance, its tissues thinning to skeletal translucence over days that stretch into anguished eternities. The reefs surface a tableau of white despair under the unrelenting sun, while opportunistic algae and cyanobacteria encroach like weeds in an untended garden, smothering what remains. Give and receive disrupted, light and life dimmed, the emotional toll ripples outward, fish schools scattering from barren arms, invertebrates fleeing the faltering fortress, a quiet catastrophe that evokes the philosophical ache of sundered bonds, the friendships frayed by unspoken strains, the partnerships tested by trials unforeseen. Yet herein lies a motivational whisper, for bleaching is not always irrevocable. If the waters cool swiftly, within weeks the polyps may reacquire wandering algal kin from the water column, their hues returning in a tentative blush, a recovery that empowers with the insight, even in heartache's hollow, the capacity for renewal persists, much as we, too, find pathways to mend what heat has rent asunder, emerging not unscathed, but wiser in our weaving. To cradle this denser revelation in reflection, interlace now a breathwork interlude of 50 seconds, a guided communion with the symbiosis's resilient pulse, allowing the theme of interdependence to settle somatically as we bridge toward tales of mending. Nestle further into your sanctuary, form yielding like a polyp to the current's nudge, and initiate the inhale through flared nostrils, drawing in the imagined effulgence of algal sugars, a warm, golden influx that fills to 6 counts, expanding the ribcage as if cellular walls part to welcome light's gift. Hold for 6, cradling the equilibrium's hush, where carbon cycle pauses in perfect poise. Give and receive suspended in amber. Exhale for 12, a protracted sigh that mirrors the polyp's gentle expulsion of excess, releasing shadows of strain from neck and solar plexus, affirming inwardly with each outflow. In this bond, I give and am given, whole in the exchange. In, hold, out. Thrice more, each iteration layering the tactile memory of harmony, from the initial visual bloom of recoloring branches softening now into the enveloping warmth of shared cellular tides against the skin's inner landscape, to the auditory undercurrent of a reef reborn. Faint gurgles of oxygen release like a lover's contented murmur, deepening the immersion until body and narrative respire in tandem, serene and restored. From this affirmed attunement, the third vignette chains forth, a hopeful counterpoint to the heartache's echo, tracing recovery's tender arc along the Great Barrier Reef's resilient flanks, where after the 2016 bleaching's widespread pallor, 89% of surveyed corals touched by the thermal scourge, their skeletons gleaming like bleached bone under aerial surveys. The survivors, those hardy massive Porites boulders with their labyrinthine valleys, begin their reclamation as temperatures ebb, opportunistic zooxanthellae from resilient strains drifting in on planktonic currents to re-inhabit the vacated cells, photosynthesizing anew within months, their golden resurgence tinting the monoliths in mottled mosaics of returning rose and taupe. Give and receive renewed, light and life rekindled, juvenile polyps, spawned in the aftermath's fragile window, settle upon the veteran's shoulders, accelerating the repopulation as cleaner shrimp and wrasse resumed their stations, the ecosystem's web mending thread by thread, a ripple of revival that cascades to encircling lagoons where fish biomass rebounds, their schools swelling like choruses after silence. This restorative rite, documented in divers' logs and satellite sweeps, speaks to the reef's innate empowerment, its capacity to adapt through genetic mosaics, some corals harboring heat-tolerant algal variants that buffer future fevers, evoking analogies to the enduring friendships that weather storms, the confidants who, after a rift's raw edge, extend olive branches of forgiveness, rebuilding trust not in erasure, but in evolution, stronger for the scars that map their shared history. In such tales, the emotional peak crests in awe at this invisible harmony, a quiet insight that uplifts the listener. Our own relational tapestries, too, hold this alchemy, where ruptures yield to recommitments, fostering a serene discovery that interdependence is not fragility's foe, but its finest forge, inviting you to carry this whisper into your evening's unfold, where sleep becomes the ultimate exchange, surrendering wakefulness for dreams' replenishment. Beyond the algal core, these sacred pacts proliferate in vignette chains that illuminate the reef's relational richness, each episode a poetic motivation for human mirroring, emphasizing emotional benefits like the solace of solidarity. Ponder the remora's hitchhiking allegiance with the reef's nomadic guardians, those suction disc fish clamping to the underbellies of sharks and turtles with a grip as steadfast as a climber's carabiner, commuting across the blue without energetic outlay while gleaning scraps from their hosts' feasts, in turn alerting the larger to parasites with insistent nudges, a commensal compact where the remora thrives sans reciprocity's full demand, yet subtly enhances the carrier's well-being, akin to the one-sided generosities in our lives, the friend who listens without ledger, their presence a balm that eases unseen loads. Affirm, in this hitch, I find my carried calm. Or trace the giant clam's luminous league with its own zooxanthellae kin, the mollusk's mantle siphoning sunlight through iridized folds that refract blues and greens in hypnotic halos, the algae fueling its filter feeding while the clam's waste nourishes their bloom, a mutualism magnified in scale where the bivalve's yawn expels nutrient plumes that seed surrounding corals, give and receive amplified to ecosystem largesse, reminding us of communal meals where one plate's overflow graces another's empty, much like neighbors trading garden surplus over a fence, simple acts compounding into waves of quiet abundance, motivational in their call to extend our own mantles of welcome, widening the circle of care that sustains the soul's deeper drifts. In this contemplative cascade, rhetorical questions arise softly, like bubbles surfacing from a hidden vent. If the coral's expulsion in bleaching's grip mirrors the heart's hasty withdrawals under stress, what gentle re-invitations might we offer in our bonds, allowing time's cooling tide to restore the flow? The reef, in its gently philosophical repose, proffers no mandates, only examples from everyday shores, the neighbor's shared fence mended after neglect, the colleague's collaboration rekindled post-conflict, relatable touchstones that ground the wonder, reinforcing repetition, give and receive, light and life, in the reef's veiled vaults as in our veiled vulnerabilities. Subtle irony graces the narrative here, in the observation that this most vital of partnerships thrives on what seems paradox, the algae, photosynthetic powerhouses, dependent on the coral's shade for survival, much as we seek shelter in connections that both illuminate and obscure, yet from this tension blooms true empowerment, a serene uplift that fosters peaceful discovery, the listener's form softening further, breaths lengthening in emulation of the cycle's unhurried turn. As these interconnected episodes, the acropora's dawn devotion, the wrass's hygienic truce, the parite's phoenix rise, converge in their shared refrain, the poetic motivations swell, such bonds, invisible yet indomitable, model for us a relational resilience that transcends the reef's turquoise bounds, empowering ocean vastness and human quietude alike, where mutual reliance becomes the antidote to isolation's subtle siege, a motivational murmur that emotional benefits abound in the art of yielding and yielding again. Everyday experiences echo this, the potted herbs on a windowsill, roots entwined in shared soil drawing strength from one another's shade, the walking companion whose pace syncs to yours, turning miles into meditations, humble harmonies that demystify the miracle, rendering the sea's exchanges accessible, aspirational, a call to nurture our own symbioses with the same tender vigilance that in giving space for light, we receive the life it kindles. Yet in this delicate balance, where give and receive orchestrate the reef's luminous lullaby, shadows gather at the edges, subtle discolorations hinting at disruptions beyond the partnership's poise. How do these gardens, so attuned to harmony's hush, whisper warnings to the world above, their pallid pleas carried on currents that lap at distant shores? From the veiled thresholds where harmony's luminous threads begin to fray at the fringes, those subtle discolorations, faint pallors creeping like morning mist over a once vibrant meadow, signal the reef's first, faltering whispers of imbalance, murmurs carried on the warming breath of the sea itself, urging the world above to heed the fragile cadence beneath, a warmth that frays into this morning mist below. These gardens, attuned to the hush of give and receive, now confront ripples of disruption that cascade from distant hearths and harbors, transforming their serene symphonies into elegies of endurance. Yet even in this twilight of trial, a reassuring undercurrent persists, the reef's quiet teachings of stewardship, where human hands, turned gentle, can mend what haste has torn, fostering not despair, but a profound empowerment through mindful guardianship. Warming waters, the foremost spectre in this unfolding shadow, rise incrementally, global averages climbing by 1 degree Celsius since the industrial dawn, with peaks in the tropics surging 2 to 3 degrees during marine heat waves that blanket the shallows like an unrelenting fever, triggering mass expulsions of zooxanthellae and bleaching cascades that have scorched 84% of the world's reefs from early 2023 through March 2025. Leaving skeletal branches exposed and ecosystems adrift in a haze of suspended recovery. Picture this thermal trespass as the sea's stolen summer, where the polyps, overwhelmed by the heat's insidious creep, jettison their algal allies in a bid for survival, their tissues paling to bone-white fragility, a visual requiem that evokes the quiet ache of overheated hearths in our own climes, rooms grown stuffy, breaths shallowing under summer's siege. Yet herein lies the philosophical grace. Such warnings, though poignant, illuminate pathways to prevention, inviting us to envision our collective exhale as the cooling counterpoint, a shared resolve to temper the fires we have kindled. As the episodic narrative progresses, let the first vignette illuminate these warming woes through the lens of a sentinel reef off Australia's storied barrier, where in the sweltering span of 2024's fourth global bleaching event, unprecedented in its ferocity, with heat stress levels exceeding 5 degrees weeks across 1,400 miles of coral sprawl. The branching acropora succumbed in waves, their once flame-like arms sloughing into ghostly spires that clattered faintly against the current like wind chimes of warning, while massive Porites boulders, those stoic anchors, endured with mottled resilience, their labyrinthine surfaces harboring pockets of unbleached vigor where microcurrents buffered the blaze. This selective scourge, a ripple of loss where 44% of warm water reefs now teeter at the very high risk of functional extinction by mid-century absent mitigation, disrupts the food web's delicate poise. Herbivorous fish, deprived of algal browses on barren branches, migrate or starve, leaving unchecked seaweeds to cloak the remnants in suffocating veils, a cascading hush where the reef's teeming chorus fades to sporadic echoes. Feel the auditory prelude to this fragility now, as sensory layers shift from the prior warmth's enveloping gurgles to the muffled roar of an approaching storm, a distant thunder of waves amplified against denuded stone, like the low rumble of thunderheads gathering on a horizon, stirring the listener's inner landscape with a somatic vigilance, the chest tightening faintly in empathy, breaths quickening to match the sea's perturbed pulse, yet softening soon into the tactile promise of regrowth's first grasp, fingers imagining the gritty resilience of recovering polyps adhering to rubble anew. Interwoven with this thermal tide comes the insidious seep of pollution, those terrestrial tributes turned toxic, nutrient-laden runoff from sprawling farmlands and urban sprawls, laced with nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizers and sewage, that bloom into algal overgrowths choking the shallows, while plastics fragment into microparticles that infiltrate the food chain, ensnaring polyps in synthetic snares and leaching endocrine disruptors that impair larval drifts. In the Caribbean's beleaguered bays, for instance, such effluents have halved seagrass meadows since the 90s, their turbid plumes clouding the light that zooxanthellae crave, a gradual dimming akin to the fog of exhaust veiling a city's dawn commute, where clarity yields to clutter, and the simple act of seeing, be it path or polyp, becomes an act of will. Overfishing compounds this veil, depleting the parrotfish and surgeonfish whose grazing keeps the canvas clean, their absence allowing macroalgae to proliferate unchecked, a food web fracture that echoes the over-harvested orchards of our lands, boughs barren for want of pollinators, yields forsaken. Yet these threats, though daunting in their convergence, evoke a gently philosophical call to stewardship. In recognizing our hand in the haze, we reclaim the role of guardian, our mindful choices, reduced runoff through riparian buffers, sustainable harvests via no-take zones, a poetic reclamation that empowers the reef's twilight vigil, turning warnings into wellsprings of collective renewal. To vary the deliberate unfolding with shorter fact bursts, contemplate these staccato signals of strain, crown of thorns starfish outbreaks, fueled by overfished predators like Triton snails, devouring up to 6 square meters of coral per year per individual. Their thorned incursions a prickle in the reef's flesh, sediment plumes from coastal dredging, burying recruits under silty shrouds that smother settlement, and the creeping acidification, oceans absorbing a quarter of anthropogenic CO2 to form carbonic acid that dissolves aragonite skeletons at rates accelerated 30% since pre-industrial times, etching away the very foundations like acid rain pitting a statue's grace. Pause, let the prickle echo. These bursts, repetitive in their revelation of human imprints, overfishing cascading to algal tyranny, pollution's plastic confetti infiltrating avian bellies and back to the base of the chain, reinforce the motif of ripple effects, a single farm's excess fertilizer, miles inland, blooms a dead zone offshore, a discarded net, adrift from a trawler, entangles a turtle's ancient wonder. Yet uplift tempers the tale, for such enumerations are not indictments, but invitations to insight, reminding us of shared human frailties, the overlooked litter in a park path, the impulsive harvest that depletes a stream's trout, everyday lapses that, when mended, restore the flow, motivational in their whisper that small surrenders to awareness yield vast harmonies. Emerging from these shadowed sketches, the second vignette stands as a standalone beacon of natural recovery, chronicling the spontaneous resurgence in Indonesia's Bird's Head seascape, where after the 2010 bleaching's pallid wake, 30% of corals lost to thermal stress, the resilient table acroporas, fragmented by the event's fury, rolled into rubble fields only to sprout anew from basal nubbins, their polyps broadcasting gametes in synchronized lunar surges that seeded vast meadows within 3 years, the seafloor transforming from desolation to a filigreed revival under the monsoon's cleansing rains. This self-healing, a quiet alchemy where broken branches calcify into clonal kin, defies the disruption's depth, herbivore schools returning to graze emergent turfs, biodiversity rebounding in a cascade of recolonization, damselfish reclaiming territories, anemones unfurling in the cleared light, a ripple of hope that philosophical musings might ponder, if the reef, rent by fever, can knit itself from shards, what latent regenerations lie dormant in our own frayed edges, the overlooked strengths that emerge not despite, but through the break? Affirm, in this resurgence, I rise from my own rubble. The sensory shift deepens here, from the auditory storm's ominous rumble now yielding to the tactile grit of regrowth's hold, imagined as the subtle adhesion of a seedling's rootlets into soil, fingers sensing the earth's yielding clasp, a somatic grounding that eases the shoulders, invites the jaw to unclench, fostering deeper calm in the listener's form as mind wanders towards stewardship's serene summons. Yet the reef's fragility finds its finest foil in humanity's emerging guardianship, and so the third vignette unfolds as an interconnected episode of global resolve, spotlighting the NOAA Coral Reef Conservation Program's multifaceted crusade, which since its 2000 inception has marshaled over $500 million toward restoration, deploying larval propagation tech in Florida's Keys where coral IVF, harvesting gametes from heat-hardy parents, culturing millions of larvae in floating nurseries, then dispersing them via drone-released currents, has boosted recruitment rates threefold since 2022, turning bleached flats into nurseries of tomorrow's branches. Give and receive extended skyward, communities in the program's fold, from Palau's no-take marine protected areas encompassing 80% of their ease to the Coral Reef Alliance's adaptive management in Hawaii, where solar-powered buoys monitor thermal thresholds to cue timely interventions. These efforts are communal healing that buffers local stressors, overfishing curbed by community-led patrols, pollution stemmed by watershed cleanups, yielding 20 to 30% higher survival in shaded sanctuaries, a motivational mosaic where individual acts aggregate into ecosystem armor. Relatable in its echo of neighborhood cleanups, the collective sweep of a littered streambed, debris bagged in shared silence, waters running clearer by eve, these initiatives empower with the insight, stewardship as a ripple returned, our hands not just in harm, but in harmony, fostering a serene uplift that carries into personal repose, where nightly reflections become acts of quiet advocacy, dreams seeding the resolve for dawn's deeds. In reassuring counterpoint, the fourth vignette traces the 30 by 30 imperatives ambitious arc, that global pledge to safeguard 30% of the ocean by 2030, including 125,000 square kilometers of shallow tropical reefs through fortified marine protected areas, bolstered by a $12 billion infusion for restoration, from the Coral Restoration Foundation's large-scale outplantings in the Florida Straits, where dive-attended nurseries grow staghorns to finger-thick resilience before bolting them to aragocrete frames, to the WCS's 2025-2030 strategy uniting 70 practitioners across continents in co-created blueprints for resilient corridors. These protected havens, numbering over 5,000 worldwide and expanding, serve as seed banks where fishing bans allow grazers to thrive, pollution controls via EPA's Clean Water Act watershed programs, reducing nitrogen loads by 40% in key U.S. territories since 2020, preserve clarity for larval light, a framework of hope where bleached veterans in MPAs recover twice as swiftly, their vignettes of revival, octopuses reclaiming lairs in regrown crevices, manta rays somersaulting over restored shallows, evoke the philosophical balm of proactive peace. In designating these sanctuaries, we honor the reef's dream, our vigilance a vow that turns fragility's echo into endurance's anthem. Much as a family's watchful garden, weeded and watered through seasons of neglect, blooms anew under tender return, inviting the listener to sense this tactile hope, the imagined press of a newly set coral fragment against substrate, firm yet forgiving, a grounding that permeates the limbs, softening the soles against the sheet's subtle weave, much like islanders trading surplus after harvest, weaving community from scarcity. As denser concepts of disruption and defense invite a pause for integration, we've now a breathwork interlude of 60 seconds, a prolonged communion with the reef's twilight guardians, allowing the shift from storm's auditory omen to regrowth's tactile embrace to resonate fully, bridging toward broader implications with somatic serenity. Surrender deeper into your haven, the former vessel adrift in imagined shallows, and commence the inhalation through the nose, envisioning the sea's perturbed swell, a turbulent influx that fills to 7 counts, the chest rising with the weight of gathering clouds, tensions coiling like overfished lines, hold for 7, cradling the fragility's hush, where warnings whisper without overwhelm, shadows softening in held awareness. Exhale for 14, a vast unfurling that scatters the storm like foam on receding waves, releasing from the core outward, belly, heart, crown, affirming with each protracted outflow. In this twilight, I guard and am guarded, resilient in release. In, hold, out. Fourfold the cycle, each revolution layering the progression, from the auditory thunder's distant growl, now tactile in the grit of sediment settling post-storm, fingers tracing the imagined texture of rubble yielding to new hold, roots tentative yet tenacious, until the body hums with the reef's hopeful pulse, immersion complete in the quiet insight that fragility forges fortitude, breath and being one in the guardian's graceful yield. Refreshed in this extended attunement, the 5th vignette arises as a standalone testament to communal mending, chronicling the Ocean Decade's 2025 innovations in Palau's Rock Islands, where indigenous-led restoration, blending traditional knowledge with robotic arms deploying heat-resilient hybrids, has outplanted over 1 million coral fragments since 2023, their survival soaring to 70% in no-take lagoons, where reduced overfishing lets triggerfish cull urchin hordes that would otherwise denude the regrowth, a ripple of revival that cascades to bolster fisheries yields in adjacent zones by 25%, fishers harvesting sustainably from the spillover. This holistic harmony, EPA-backed water quality pacts curbing sewage incursions to preserve the clarity, evokes the everyday renewal of a community quilt, stitches from diverse hands binding tears into patterns of purpose, philosophical in its reminder. Our role as stewards is not dominion, but dialogue, a serene empowerment where listening to the sea's pallid pleas yields protocols of protection, from global tipping point thresholds now breached, tropical reefs crossing into irreversible decline without halved emissions by 2030, to local legacies of light, where one diver's careful cull of invasive algae sparks a chain of verdant return. Rhetorical whispers stir, if these gardens, shadowed yet stirring, teach us the art of timely tending, what overlooked overtures in our own harbors, a filtered drain, a foregone net, might summon such sanctuaries from the surge? The reef, in contemplative quiet, offers affirmation through action, its vignettes of vigilance a motivational map for the human heart, fostering peaceful discovery in the balance of burden and boon. In the contemplative close of these guardian tales, subtle irony graces the narrative. The reef, so vast in its vulnerability, a structure spanning ecosystems yet felled by degrees uncounted, teaches surrender amid strife, its endurance not in unyielding stone, but in the yielding that invites rebirth, much as the willow bends to gale where oak splinters, a light observational touch that uplifts without undercutting the oar. Repetition reinforces the refrain, ripple upon ripple, threat upon tending, as interconnected explanations illuminate broader stakes. Warming's acidification eroding 40% of calcification potential by 2050, pollution's plastics persisting centuries in the chain, overfishing's voids echoing in empty markets, yet counterbalanced by conservation's crescendo, from the coral reef breakthrough's billion-dollar blueprint to grassroots grafts in Belize's barriers, where community rangers patrol with the poise of elders, their watches weaving human wisdom into the web. Everyday echoes abound, the backyard compost turning waste to wealth, the carpool easing exhaust's edge, humble harmonies that demystify the mandate, rendering guardianship accessible, aspirational, a call to carry this quiet insight into the hush of hearth, where sleep's surrender mirrors the reef's resilient repose. In the face of these tides, relentless yet revealing, the reefs teach us surrender, not struggle, their pallid pleas a pedagogy of poise, and in their endurance, forged from fragility's forge, what final lessons of unity emerge for the wanderer on shore, drawing shore and sea into one unbroken breath? From the shattered confluence where tides of trial meet the shore's expectant curve, those final lessons of unity emerge not as thunderous decrees, but as the soft susurrus of waves folding into sand, a murmured wisdom that binds the wanderer step to the reef's eternal undulation, revealing how these underwater gardens, with their layered legacies of stone and soul, mirror the rhythms of our own nocturnal voyages, where sleep's gentle ebb and flow echoes the lunar pool that governs polyps spawning and larval drifts, inviting us to surrender to the same tidal lullaby that cradles both human dream and oceanic dreamscape. In this reflective reverie, the reef's narrative arcs back upon itself, vignettes from the forger formation to the fragility's forge intertwining like fronds in a current's caress, each thread a reminder of interconnected wonder, the solitary polyp's accretive ascent, budding into clonal kin through the silent alchemy of calcium whispers, paralleling the quiet compounding of our evening's unwindings, where fragmented thoughts settle into the sediment of subconscious, rebuilding resolve layer upon layer, life upon life, until dawn's light reveals a self renewed, resilient in its humble holdings. Feel this recap not as rote return, but as a poetic recapitulation, the branching acropora's vertical valor, rising millimeter by millennial millimeter against the sea's indifferent weight, evoking the personal ascents we trace in shadowed hours, from the rubble of a day's dispersal to the emergent spires of insight, where what seemed barren breakage yields to verdant reach, a motivational murmur that empowers the listener. In emulating such patient persistence, our own growth need not clamor for conquest, but bloom in the unhurried grace of incremental grace. Layered into this interlinked reflection, the symphony of hidden lives resurfaces as a harmonious hum, the parrotfish's resplendent raspings, grinding greens into the pearl-white drifts of distant beaches, recalling how our daily grazings upon the world's offerings, the gleaning of lessons from labor's leavings, fertilize not just soils afar, but the inner landscapes we till through twilight's tendering, where biodiversity's exquisite equipoise becomes metaphor for the soul's diverse domains, the clownfish's bold dart among stinging sentinels, a dance of diplomatic daring that shields and sustains, mirroring the alliances we forge in vulnerability's venue, those pacts where one entity's haven fortifies another's horizon, fostering a serene recognition that our relational reefs, familial fronds, friendly fans, thrive not in isolation's ledge, but in the web's woven welcome, uplifting us with the quiet insight that multiplicity, whether in finned flocks or heartfelt fellowships, is the true architecture of endurance. And oh, the sacred exchanges that pulse beneath, the zooxanthellae's golden gifts transmuting light into life's elixir within the polyp's veiled vault, a give and receive as intimate as the breath's unspoken barter, Inhale, drawing essence from the ether. Exhale, yielding dross to the dawn, reminding us that our deepest dependencies, the unseen symbioses with kin and cosmos, fuel not just survival, but the soul's subtle flourishing, where bleaching's heartache, that pallid purge of parted partners, whispers of our own relational rifts, yet consoles with recovery's blush, the tentative tint of trust restored, empowering us to reinvite what heat has hurried hence, mending not in erasure, but in evolved embrace. Yet even these echoes of harmony cast contemplative glances toward the twilight's trials, where fragility's forged tempers the tale with a philosophical poise, the warming waves' stolen summers, scorching 84% of reefs in their 2023-2025 siege, tipping thresholds into dieback's domain, serving as stark sentinels of our shared susceptibility, their ghostly spires a spectral summons to the wanderer on shore, just as the reef's pallor pleads for planetary pause, so might our overheated hastes, the fevers of unchecked chase, invite a cooler cadence in our courses, where overfishing's voids and pollution's plumes, nutrient nightmares clouding clarity, plastics persisting as pernicious confetti, mirror the cluttered corners of our commutes and consumptions, those everyday encroachments that dim our own lights of leisure. In this broader implication, the reef unveils a One Health tapestry, an interconnected weave where coral vitality and human well-being entwine inextricably, their medicinal murmurs, compounds from sponges and squirts hinting at cures for cancers and contagions, flow into our pharmacies, their filtration fortitudes purifying waters that quench coastal kin, their seafood sanctuaries sustaining 500 million souls with protein's pure provision, all while their storm-buffering bulwarks shield 600 million from surge's savage kiss, a global guardianship that, if lost to the 70 to 90% decline projected at 1.5 degrees more, would cascade into coastal cataclysms and health's hollowing hush. Rhetorically, one might ponder in the hush, if the reef's resilience, once assumed in its siloed food webs now revealed as vulnerably veiled, hinges on our vigilant variants, diverse strains of heat-hardy hybrids outplanted in 2025's tidal turns, what siloed sectors in our societies, the overlooked overlaps of health and habitat, might we harmonize to heal the whole? The narrative, gently philosophical, offers no edicts, only evocations from the everyday, the backyard filter of rain barrels easing urban runoff's reach, the mindful meal from sustainable seas nourishing body and bay alike, relatable rights that demystify the mandate, rendering global unity accessible, a serene summons to see ourselves not as shorebound spectators, but as integral inlets in the ocean's ongoing ode. As these recapped reveries ripple into philosophical ties, The reef emerges as metaphor for personal growth's profound progression, its polyps' patient persistence, a single-cell secretion scaling to subaqueous spires over eons, echoing the incremental infillings of our inner evolutions, where nightly noticings, those subtle affirmations amid the sheet's soft settle, accrete into architectures of assurance, the dawn fluorescence of a foregone grudge yielding to the tactile tenacity of renewed resolve, much as the parrotfish's mucous mantle shields its slumber. So might we cocoon our vulnerabilities in vulnerability's veil, awakening not armored, but awakened to the day's diverse demands. This human reef parallel extends to sleep's sacred cadence, the tide's twice daily tango, high waters at moon's meridian, lows in shadowed lulls, mirroring our circadian crests and troughs, where melatonin rises like nocturnal plankton in the brain's briny blue, inviting drift into delta waves as restorative as the reef's algal infusions, a tidal therapy that synchronizes somatic surrender. Imagine your inhales sinking to the swell's subtle surge, exhales to the recede's release, body buoyed in the buoyancy of bioluminescent bloom, where the reef's nocturnal hush, comb jellies pulsing ethereal azures, octopuses dreaming in denned depths, whispers permission to dissolve into the dark, fostering peaceful discovery and the realization that rest is no retreat, but reconnection, a nightly nod to the unity where personal repose replenishes the planetary pulse. In broader strokes, this interconnectedness illuminates global harmonies. The 30 by 30 pledges 2025 strides, safeguarding 30% of seas, prioritizing resilient reefs as carbon sinks absorbing a quarter of our emissions, binding coastal economies to ecological ethos, where protected paradises like Palau's 80% ease not only buffer bleaching's bite but bolster fisheries flow, spilling bounty to bordering bays, a ripple of reciprocity that evokes the communal quilts of our quarters, threads from varied hands weaving warmth for the whole. Uplifting in its aspiration, this vision empowers, if the reef's restoration, through coral IVF tripling recruits, robotic relays in rock islands outplanting millions, can knit from 2025's fractured fields, so might our collective kinships, bending mid-century's projected perils with mindful mosaics, turning tipping points into turning tides, a motivational metaphor where the wanderers whisper, advocating for clean currents, choosing conscious catches, contributes to the chorus that sustains the song. To deepen this tying of threads, interlace now a breathwork interlude of 60 seconds, a final guided communion with the reef's unifying undulation, allowing the philosophical parallels to permeate somatically as sensory layers descend into quietude's quilt. Recline into the hush, if you will, the former frond in the current's kindling, and draw the inhalation through the nose, envisioning the tidal tug, a lunar pull that swirls the chest to 8 counts, filling with the imagined brine of interconnected brine, polyps pulsing in planetary poise, hold for 8, savoring the unity's hush, where personal and pelagic pause as one, growth's gradients suspended in serene suspension, exhale for 16, a languid letting go that ebbs like the reef's nocturnal recede, dispersing from crown to toes any vestiges of vigilance, affirming with each outflow, in this unity, I ebb and am ebbing, whole in the waves' welcome. In, hold, out. Fivefold the cycle, each breath evolving the descent, from the tactile tenacity of regrowth's grip, now softening into the enveloping hush of bioluminescent haze, a faint phosphorescent prickle fading to the auditory veil of wave-worn whispers, shell song sighs like a lover's last lullaby, until the body dissolves into the dream's drift, immersion absolute in the quiet insight that sleep and sea are siblings in surrender, breath and being bound in the reef's eternal embrace. Emerging from, or perhaps dissolving further into, this attuned twilight, the emotional close unfurls in affirmations of awe, the reef's vignettes converging in a crescendo of serene uplift, envision the dawn awakening's ethereal glow, now recast as the mind's morning mercy, polyps unfurling not just fronds, but forgivings, the biodiversity's ballet a blueprint for the brain's bustling bazaar, where diverse thoughts dart like damselfish, negotiating niches in neural nooks, the sacred symbiosis a sacrament for the self, algal allies within awakening to inner illuminations, turning daily dross into dream's delight. Even fragility's forge, with its bleaching balms and guardian grafts, graces us with growth's gospel, the wisdom that wounds, when witnessed with wonder, widen our capacities for compassion, both personal and planetary, where the wanderer's wounds become wellsprings for wider worlds. Rhetorical resonances linger. What if our nightly nestlings, cocooned in covers as the parrotfish in mucus, nurture not just neural nets, but nets of nurture, extending empathy's tendrils to the tides we share? The reef, in its contemplative close, consoles without conclusion, its lessons looping like lunar cycles, resilience in repetition, unity in undulation, fostering a feeling of peaceful discovery that permeates the pause, the peaceful pulse of heart and habitat harmonized, empowering the listener to carry this choral cadence into consciousness's quiet corners, where everyday evocations, the salt-kissed stroll at sunset, the shared supper from sustainable swells, become bridges to the broader, a motivational mosaic where human harmony heals the hurtling whole. In these interlinked illuminations, the reef's broader implications bloom into a beacon for global grace, its One Health interconnections, where coral's clarity filters contagions from coastal currents, safeguarding the 600 million who dwell in its lee from waterborne woes, while its medicinal murmurs, over 2,000 bioactive compounds harvested for hypertension's hush and herpes halt, promise pandemics preempted, a pharmacological poetry that ties tropical tangles to therapeutic tomes, reminding us that the reefs decline, with food webs fracturing into siloed sorrows as revealed in 2025 studies, would not just hollow oceans, but hollow havens, coastal collapses costing trillions in tourism's tide and fisheries fall. Yet hope horizons the horizon. The 2025 tides turn with corals crusades, assessing health in Hawaiian havens, fortifying protected paradises through 30 by 30's embrace, where resilient strains, bred in buoyant breakthroughs, buffer the bleaching's bite, outplantings in the ocean decades dawn, restoring not just reefs, but relational rights, communities coalescing in conservation's calm, from Palau's patrolled paradises to Florida's floating foundlings, a global gospel where anthropause's accidental graces during COVID's quiet, reef rebounds in fished-forsaken fields, hint at intentional idols ahead, if we heed the hush. Philosophical in its breadth, this binding beckons, the reef as Rosetta for our relational renaissance, where personal poise, yielding to sleep's tidal tug, propels planetary poise, everyday acts of alignment, the eschewal of excess, the embrace of equity, echoing the polyp's patient pledge, building not barriers, but bridges across the blue, a serene summons to see the self in the sea, the shore in the sleeper, unity not as utopian dream, but as unfolding dawn. As the sensory descent completes its quiet cascade, from the tactile tenacity of twilight's tendrils, now a faint phosphorescence fading into the enveloping auditory hush of wave-worn whispers, shell songs sighing into silence's soft shore, the emotional affirmations anchor in the core. You are woven into this wonder, resilient as the rubbles return, harmonious as the hidden hum. In the reef's reflective repose, find your own, a peaceful discovery that sleep is the ultimate unity, tides turning thoughts to tranquility, dreams drifting on the current's kind caress. Carry this whisper, listener, as the night enfolds, the coral's cadence in your chest's quiet rise, the ocean's ode in your outbreath's ease, all one in the eternal, unbroken breath.